Thank you, Chris. I'm tempted to start off by complaining about my dire need for a haircut, but I think so many folks on the call are probably finding themselves in similar situations, from the nail salons to hair salons to what have you. So I'll skip that. Everyone, for those who don't know me, my name is Harry Koulos. I'm a senior litigation associate at the law firm Skadden Arps. My firm is famous for a few achievements, but one of the most recognizable to this wider audience might be that in the TV show Suits, the characters, even the infamous Harvey Specter, refer to my firm Skadden as one of their firm's greatest competitors. Happy to discuss legal career, things like that in the networking session immediately after this Zoom call with my old friend, John Papaspanos, who's on the call as well. I can cover the litigation side and he can cover the corporate side of law. And so we're excited to talk to many of you there. So I won't, with my closing remarks here, won't talk about the law very much. We'll just try to talk about my personal experience and things that I've learned that I think would be helpful to high school or college students. John Papaspanos, who I just mentioned, he also just joked that whether I will be hosting my closing remarks as the show Between Two Ferns that was hosted by Zach Galifianakis. I don't think I'm going to be nearly as entertaining as Zach Galifianakis, but hopefully I'll have some insights that folks can take away. But before I get started, I think I have to thank Chris Salbudes, our dear host. Put it simply, Chris puts the future of our community and the youth first, and that's what's always drawn me to Philo for Thought and to helping and to being a part of it. And I think a testament to all of her work, hard work, is the number of people on this call and her genuine desire to develop the young professionals. And that's embodied by, the age of many of her moderators and speakers, from a very young student in Greece to people in their 20s and 30s. So thank you, Chris, from the bottom of my heart, and everybody else on this call, for really taking a genuine interest in developing our careers in the future of the community. I have a few points to share, but I figured I would start with building off of what Mr. Pyrogolaikis and Mr. Papakostas touched on at the beginning of the conference. They said, it's easy to be successful at things you're passionate about. And I agree. And in fact, I've encouraged my younger brother to do the same. So for some young high school students or college students who are going through this, I wanted to share my little brother's snippet for you all. For years, he was training to become a doctor. All the most successful people in my family were doctors. Taking organic chemistry, he was moving liquids from one test tube to another, chopping mice brains, studying for the MCAT. He had the courage recently to make the transition from that career path to the esports gaming industry, because he's been just most passionate about that. And he had the courage to talk to my family and to make that turn to his new career. He's already had many callbacks and will be starting a job, hopefully in Austin in the coming weeks, despite the COVID situation. So for all of you out there who, it's never too late to reflect on yourself and think what career you should pursue, even if it may seem like a radical change. Another thing I wanted to share about following your passions, and I don't think Mr. Pyrogolaikis or Mr. Papakostas were advocating for a narrow approach when they said that, but I wanted to clarify to the students on the call that when you think about your passions, don't think about them narrowly. So when I was a kid, I loved history. People would assign you pages 150 to 160 of your history book to read. I'm the kid that would open it up to page 80 and just start reading for fun and get engrossed for minutes before I would go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I need to finish my actual homework. So taking the advice we heard on today's call literally, people might think, oh, Harry, you should become a history professor. But that's not exactly the case. I think that when you say follow your passions, think about the subject matter as a whole. Don't be narrow. Okay, I love history, I'm going to be a professor. Think about it the skills perspective. I think I'm an effective lawyer. And what do I mean by that? Archaeology and history are somewhat related. But when you think about the skills that went into my love of history, it's love of reading, love of synthesizing different things that are going on, and thinking about what other jobs you could do with those same skills. Being a lawyer, the exact same skills as being a historian. Reading, synthesizing what's happening across legal cases, and then making an argument for what you think the outcome should be. Now, we're talking about being a lawyer. A critical thing of being a lawyer is always be prepared. So I'll tell you a little excerpt from my first day of law school. Maybe some of the folks in the room can relate to it. My first day of law school, the professor stormed into the classroom, threw his casebook down on the podium, and he said, "Mr. Koulos, what's an assumpsit?" An assumpsit, I asked myself. Oh, shoot. I had looked that up the night before as I was reading the cases that had been assigned. It was buried in a footnote, but I couldn't recall it for the life of me in the class when I was called on. Luckily, neither could anyone in the class answer that question. If anybody on this call knows what an assumpsit is, I'd be impressed. I think it's a hard question. The answer for those curious is it's an action for breach of contract seeking damages. It's just an old way of referring to it. So my advice from this story is, well, I guess that things in Legally Blonde kind of do happen sometimes in real life, where professors are kind of mean and using the Socratic method. But I wanted to tell folks to both be like me and don't be like me. So like me in that story, don't forget to read the footnotes and to look up what a new concept is when you see it in the assigned work. I looked up that night what an assumpsit was. I just didn't write it down and commit it to memory. So unlike me, yes, write that down, commit it to memory, and don't get the answer wrong on your first day of graduate school. And there's one thing I did want to mention about hard work, which has to do with always being prepared. And that's the term secret sauce that Mr. Papakostas mentioned at the beginning of this conference. That made me think of a story for me where we were suing, my client had bought a company for $800 million. Not my client personally, my firm's client. Had bought a company for $800 million. And it turned out that that company we bought had been making all of its money and it was an attractive investment because it was committing fraud. And you ask, what kind of fraud? Well, what it was doing was selling plastic. So think about your car. They would get an order for plastic that needed to be durability level 8 and fire resistance level 10. But what would this company do that we bought? It would sell it for durability level 5 and fire resistance level 5, which is way lower than what was requested. And then they would provide a certificate saying that it met the client's expectations. Now, the company we were suing said, the management said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Maybe some young people on the totem pole knew about the fraud, but us, very sophisticated investors had no idea about the fraud. And we said, no, you said it was your secret sauce. You called it that. You knew about this fraud. They denied it and they said, we're not paying you any money at all. Never happened. Never called it a secret sauce. Never knew about the fraud. Well, so what was I tasked with doing as a junior associate? I was tasked with looking through thousands of documents among a whole other team of associates to try to find any indication that these managers knew about the fraud. It was one of the worst assignments I ever had, late nights and everything. But I will say, I was able to find a document from the CEO of the company we were suing using the term secret sauce in an email. And not that that won the case alone, but it was hugely helpful to bolstering our case that they knew about the fraud and that my client was entitled to millions of dollars in return for being defrauded. All that's to say, work hard, and even if a task seems insurmountable or daunting, you can handle it and you can make a difference, even if you're a very junior person on the team, even if you never had a lot of experience in whatever career you chose. You can do it. A couple more points. Another one I think has been really interesting that I've learned over time, and my best friend Ted Koutsubis, who many of you on this call might know, he's an up-and-coming lobbyist in Washington, D.C. He always has said, perception is reality. Now, some of you have heard this phrase, but over time, I think it's really important to be aware of. So I come to every meeting with an agenda prepared. Even if that agenda only took me 5 minutes to put together before the meeting, it makes everyone in the room think that you're on top of it and you are prepared to be promoted and you can control situations and take leadership roles. All that great perception came from a reality of 5 minutes of work. But the flip side's also true. You can work super hard behind the scenes, but when you're in front of other people, You could be maybe not dressed well, not act professionally, not paying attention in your meeting. And then people might think in reality, you don't work that hard or don't care, when in reality you do. So I would encourage folks to be cognizant that perception is reality, and your reputation at your law firm or wherever you work can be hugely important to other opportunities you get. Had I not created those agendas in my early years, I never would have been on that case that let me find the secret sauce document, and it all snowballs. But one thing I've noticed from mentoring some young people is that be humble while doing so. I think everybody on this call had impressive resumes, but it stood out to me over time when some young associate or young people who want to interview and be at my law firm are not humble or brag about their achievements. And to be honest, I made that mistake too when I was in high school and just starting out. You should be proud of what you've achieved, but there are ways of conveying it that can bolster your image, but not make you come across as conceited or full of yourself, which could be very well a reason why you don't get a job. Let's see. Okay, 2 last points of career advice from me. Take them for what they're worth, given that I suppose I'm relatively young to the other speakers, but last 2. And this one's connected to the perception point I made, and it's also related to what Ms. Tavia in her talk said. Think about yourself as CEO of Me Inc., of yourself in your brain. When you first meet people and they ask you, for example, what do you do? There are many ways of answering that question. An example that immediately comes to my mind and that I've experienced recently is someone told me, and I asked, what do you do? They said, I'm an event planner. Okay. Well, that doesn't, now that I know this person, that description, I'm an event planner, does not do her or her skills justice, not even close. In reality, that event planner could answer that same question by saying, I plan events for an English public company. I specialize in planning and executing leading events in the biotech industry that average about 4,000 attendees. Now, for you students out there, which of those 2 people, the person who simply says, I'm an event planner, which leaves open to interpretation what they do, or something more specific that shows you and demonstrates that they're maybe worth networking with, you have immediate respect and interest in getting to learn more about. So think about that everything you say, whether it's on your resume or in response to a question at networking, you can say it in multiple ways. And depending on how you say it, will convey a completely different message. Now, last one I want to share is from a United States district judge that's now a partner at my law firm. He had this phrase, always touch someone 5 times before you ask for anything. Now, what does he mean by that? He basically means when you meet someone and you want something from them, or you would like something from them, don't ask for it immediately. Like if you're trying to develop business, touch them first. Do things for them. Think about how you can help them, even if it's in small ways. Touch their life 5 times before you ever ask for anything. And his thinking was, before you ever formally ask, they might offer exactly what you want. Or after touching them 5 times, they're more likely to agree and do what you ask. And let me give one example from my life where this is played out. An acquaintance from my childhood in California, he texted me one random New Year's Eve night in New York City and asked me, what are you doing tonight, Harry? And I said, oh, I'm at my law firm, my old office. Our old office was right next to where the ball drops in Times Square. I said, at the office, you're welcome to come join us. Entertained her and her family that night at the law firm, and they left. We never talked again, but I touched her that night, touched her family in that way of entertaining them. What happens? A year later, she calls me with an opportunity to represent someone close to the famous actor. This might be before the time of some of the young students on this call, Nicolas Cage, and now that's a client of our firm. And you never know when you touch someone. In that case, I only needed to touch someone once to get something that I would have loved to happen to me, a new client. And so touch someone 5 times, or try to touch them a little bit before asking for anything. Now, that doesn't always apply to just getting a coffee. You can ask me or John Papaspanos or anyone else probably on this call to get a coffee, talk for 5 minutes, any of those smaller things. But even if you could, like let's say you knew my little brother went to the same college as you just graduated from, maybe offer to talk. Even something as simple as that can go a long way in building relationships. So I'm going to close and turn it over to Chris, but I want to make one point after all. This is a Greek event, and are there anyone on this call whose family came from Constantinople, Asia Minor, Smyrna, anywhere which now modern day Turkey? I'm sure there are, no need to speak up. I'm sure there's at least someone. And what I'm about to say is related directly to that. My hope is for the community, I think a lot of people on this call, for all of us to automatically help one another to make this community as successful as possible. Like Mr. Papakostas said at the beginning, our community already is very successful, as demonstrated by the people on this call, like Mr. Papakostas himself and Mr. Kalaitzidis and everyone else. But just imagine how much more successful we'd all be if, like Chris Alboudis and others of us, automatically try to help one another. Don't look at it as I'm jealous of another lawyer, another person that's Greek in your profession or your church. Think about it as, how can I make them more successful? And I promise, by focusing on how we can make other people in our community more successful, just like the touch people before you ask for something advice, that will come full circle, make our whole community more prosperous, and allow us to have more power politically as a community, and it will be better for Greece. And just the timeless expression, learn from history, this is played out in our Greek history. Let me give you a couple examples that will all ring true. First, we've all seen the movie 300, but Greeks were united in repelling the Persian invasions in 480 BC. And that led to the golden age of Greece, the Parthenon, and all of those things that we're famous for. Another example is Ohide, right? Greece told Mussolini, no, Ohi, and we were the first victory in World War II. Greece, little Greece of a few million people, was the first victory of World War II, and is also arguably, and said by many historians, and as many of you know, to be a reason that Hitler's invasion of Russia was unsuccessful and that the World War II actually came out in the Allies' favor. Now, on the other hand, when we're divided, some of the most devastating things in Greek history have happened to us. And I don't want that to repeat in the future, and none of us should. The most devastating example I can think of is after World War I, Greece was given all what is today Western Turkey. Smyrna, Eastern Thrace, all that was given over to Greece. And that's part of why the Athens airport is named Eleftherios Venizelos Airport, because he negotiated that at the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. But what happened was there became a dispute between the monarchy and Mr. Venizelos, which ultimately led to us losing the support of the Allies and allowing the Turkish army to destroy Smyrna and to basically cause us to lose all of those gains we had made in the Treaty of Versailles. And that's why today, because we were divided between the monarchy and Mr. Venizelos back then, and the people who wanted a democratic government for Greece, because of that divide, which led to our loss in that war after World War I with Turkey, Turkish politicians today say, when there's issues with Greece, they say, we'll throw the Greeks back into the sea like we did in 1922. Now, I don't know how that makes you all feel, but it doesn't make me feel good. And so if that's not an incentive for us to be united, I don't know what is. Now, this doesn't mean support Greeks blindly or Greece blindly, or just any Greek candidate that interviews at your company or wants to be mentored. They have to be, demonstrate that they're capable and up and coming and worthy of that position. So with all that said, Chris, it might have been a little longer than you asked, but I'll turn it back to you and hopefully we can get started with networking. And thank you for the privilege and honor of being able to share some thoughts with this esteemed group. Take care.